If you recognize that we are in an ideological war, which is technically a war between competing memes and meme complexes, then you can also understand that there is a hierarchy of different types of soldiers who are competing in this war of ideas. At the bottom of the mimetic warrior hierarchy are grunts. That's most of the people watching this video. Grunts are your standard riflemen that serve as the backbone of any ideological faction. These are people who don't have a large following of any kind and whose ideas and memes really only immediately spread to the people they know personally or in their small networks. While every major ideological faction like conservatism, progressivism, or libertarianism has potentially millions of grunts fighting on their behalf, that does not mean they are insignificant. You have to remember that mimetic wars are won at the level of local battlefields. Your friend group, your school board, your workplace, these are all the actual mimetic battlefields where the war of ideas takes place. A few soldiers securing a strategic point in a particular battle may turn the tide of that battle, which in turn affects the entire outcome of the war. And a grunt who writes a well-worded email to their woke HR department, or someone who creates a viral meme that reaches millions, well, these activities by these lowly grunts may very well turn the tide of an ideological war to favor whatever ideology you serve. Now, I should point out that arguing about politics is often a useless and degenerate behavior, and any comparisons to military warfare are meant to illustrate the mechanism by which some ideas win out over others. It is not an attempt to justify spending hours a day online arguing with other socially stunted strangers. But moving on, above grunts are your lieutenants and captains. These are the people that the grunts kind of look up to for their opinions and perspectives. A lieutenant or captain might be the most senior person in your department at the corporation you work at, a professor with a lot of students, a pastor with a large congregation, or just some middle-tier influencer who rides off the coattails of success of a few famous YouTubers. And above your lieutenants and captains, you have your generals. These are the well-known influencers with massive audiences. Now, this isn't a perfect analogy because in a military hierarchy, usually the most competent people rise to the top. That is clearly not the case, given if you've spent any time online in online political realms. And so, if you think about it, it's almost guaranteed that there are at least a few people watching this video who, if not for the fact that they just don't have a large platform, are certainly more competent at advancing the interests of whatever ideology I believe in, more so than me. But I, happen to have the platform. But the point is, influencers like Hasan Piker, Klein, and IDubbz have a powerful, if not relatively diffuse effect on political discourse. And when these individuals allow their personal moral failings to seep into their beliefs and how they communicate their ideas, it's like if a military general started making, strategic decisions based on what was good for his ego rather than what was actually good for the country that he's serving or the ideology that he's fighting for. And this is what I see in the dynamics between people like Klein, IDubbz, and Hasan Piker. The whole issue of Israel-Palestine is consequential for a variety of reasons, not least of which is because it is absolutely destroying what is left of the left-right political divide and creating an entirely new political landscape rife with opportunities here in the United States. So the incompetence of someone like Hasan Piker is concerning because it is the many people who agree with some of the points he has to make that suffer as a result. Now, even if you dislike Hasan, especially if you dislike Hasan, it's important to acknowledge the genuinely good things about him, which can be difficult if you are not well-versed in the art of Enlightened Centrism, as I am. You can't properly assess someone's faults if you can't also identify their redeemable qualities. Hasan, like many influencers, is looked up to by a ton of mainly young males. And in a time when a lot of these kids are lost, hearing some good advice is better than hearing none.
True masculine, or like whatever positive quality that you want to attribute to men and women as well, vice versa, comes from confidence, okay? Inner peace that you have found within yourself because you know what your limitations are, you know what your goals are, you can set goals for yourself and you can achieve them. You believe in yourself, you have inner peace, okay? It's very difficult to accomplish. It's easier said than done, 100%.
If you want to evaluate Hasan's role in the Great Meme Wars, I think Jordan Peterson's description of Andrew Tate actually applies very similarly to Hasan.
And I know why they're attracted to Andrew Tate. They'd rather be Andrew Tate than an incel, and they're right. It's best to give the devil his due. Like if you had to choose between being kind of flabby and unhealthy and resentful and in your basement looking at pornography, and you're ineffectual and the future looks pretty damn gloomy. And then you see Andrew Tate, who's hyper masculine in an almost manner that's almost a parody, and wealthy and famous, and apparently has women at his disposal. You'd think, well, I'd much rather be him than me. That's the incorporation of the shadow from the Jungian perspective. It's like, it's right.
So don't overestimate the degree to which people like Hasan because of his political takes versus the fact that he simply embodies some genuinely charismatic and pro-social behaviors that would be good for young, impressionable men to imitate. But the real problem is that Hasan believes in a particular type of pathological progressive ideology that is utterly self-defeating. If you are someone who believes that Israel is engaging in deeply immoral behavior, not just to the Palestinians in Gaza, but also in how its supporters are leveraging identity politics to censor criticism of Israel,
it is not enough for people, especially public figures, to be neutral or not be anti-Semitic. One must be anti-Semitic.
Then you should recognize how useless Hasan is in making the case for Palestinians. If you are serious about ending the suffering of Palestinian children who are starving to death as we speak, one of the most important long-term mimetic goals is to create space for American Jews to be able to freely condemn Israel without being attacked for, their genetics and shit. Ethan Klein is exactly the kind of pro-Palestinian Jew who people like Hasan Piker should be eager to build bridges and coalitions with.
They're led by Netanyahu, who should resign in disgrace and go to prison for being a war criminal. He's made a coalition of the most radically conservative freaks that don't represent, by the way, the majority of Israelis.
The biggest crime the Israeli government ever committed, which is basically engineered by Netanyahu, is this Western expansionism. The settlers is just vile, vile, vile shit. They should all be removed. All settlements from the West Bank should be absolutely bulldozed.
Right, but this is coming from a Jew married to an Israeli citizen. Now, to be fair, I think that's a perfectly reasonable statement to make. I don't see how anyone could disagree with the claim that extremist Israeli settlers who chant death to Arabs are just as morally decrepit as Hamas supporters who chant death to Jews. But people like Hasan are so far removed from pragmatic political coalition building that it doesn't matter. He has no incentive to build bridges in the first place. He is the left-wing equivalent of a megachurch pastor who preaches how terrible materialism and capitalism is, while siphoning millions of dollars of donations from his followers and living in luxury. Now, I still go back and forth on the argument that you need extremists on the far left and far right to push the discourse in the correct direction when it, becomes off balance. Whether or not, that might be true, and if it is, well, Hasan certainly fits that label. Now, Ethan Klein is the other mimetic general who is at war with Hasan in this ideological conflict, and he has his own personal failings, which is negatively affecting the, pro-Palestinian cause. He's proven that he has terrible judgment because he was willing to go into business with someone like Hasan Piker. Okay, newsflash, it is good and necessary to have productive conversations with people who have extreme political beliefs. But it is a terrible idea to go into business with someone who hangs a flag of a genocidal regime in the background of their YouTube videos. The fact that Ethan Klein was willing to go into business with someone like that to foster an audience of exactly the kind of people who, have been attacking him the way that they have, it's a sign that he was motivated not by, common sense, but by trying to gather clout and have a large audience. Everyone knows that nobody is more disappointed in the fall of Jordan Peterson than I am. But he was dead on the money in his prediction that Ethan's choice to associate with such ideologically possessed freaks would backfire on him. And oh, how that has come true. Then there's IDubbz. I have never once watched a Content Cop episode before, but I did watch this one, and I do recall him making some good points, but they were overshadowed by the beginning of the video, which was cringier than anything I've ever done, which is a lot. The time has come for the 420th Special Memes Division of the Enlightened Centrist Army Group to unleash its most powerful mimetic weapon, Swiftian normality. And then the end of the video was this gross, emotionally manipulative, after insulting you for an hour, we're going to say a bunch of nice things. And it's really just pathetic. I genuinely have a hard time evaluating, the effect of someone like IDubbz, who is not particularly political, but then gets peripherally involved in all of these exchanges between political influencers. I'll have to ask Gokunaru when I talk to him about it. And then there is me, and I have many problems, one of which is I lack any competent critics. And if you think that you are one and you want to come on stream and argue with me, send me a well-worded email laying out your disagreements, and you can join one of my Arguing with Viewers streams, which will begin next week. Until then, good luck and Godspeed.